The wind howled outside the large bay windows of my home, rattling the glass and shaking the thick curtains that had hung in place for decades. Inside, the warmth of the fireplace was a welcome contrast to the cold weather. But despite the cozy ambiance of my living room, I felt an ice-cold chill settle deep in my bones. I had always been the kind of mother who gave everything for my children. From the moment Andrew, my only son, was born, I promised myself that I would do everything in my power to provide for him, to give him a life better than the one I had. I had worked tirelessly to build my wealth, becoming a successful entrepreneur after years of struggle. When Andrew married Rachel, I welcomed her into our family without hesitation, proud to support them both. Over the years, I had helped them in every way I could. Paying off their debts, gifting them a house, funding their vacations, and giving them money whenever they asked. I was happy to help. It gave me joy to see my son and his family thriving, and I had no complaints until recently. Something had shifted, something I couldn't ignore anymore. It started with small, almost imperceptible changes. Andrew seemed to ask for money more frequently. At first, I didn't mind. After all, they had 2 children now, and raising kids was expensive. But then the requests became more frequent, more urgent. "Mom, we need to fix the roof," Andrew would say. "Mom, Rachel's car broke down. We need a new one. Mom, we're a little short on the mortgage payment this month." These were the kinds of things I could help with, and I did. But what I didn't realize was that it was never enough. And then came the night that changed everything. Rachel came to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of frustration and something darker, resentment maybe. She sat down in the chair across from me, folding her arms tightly across her chest. "Mom, I think we need to talk about your financial contributions to our family." My heart sank. What was this about? Rachel had never been particularly confrontational, but tonight she seemed different. She had been more distant lately, and now, as I looked at her, I could sense that something was bubbling beneath the surface. "I don't understand," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've always helped you both. I've supported you, and I've never asked for anything in return." "What's wrong?" She sighed, rubbing her temples as if she were trying to calm herself before speaking. "That's just it, Mom. You've helped too much. You've made it too easy for Andrew to rely on you, and I've had enough of it." I blinked, unsure if I had heard her correctly. "What do you mean, too much? You've been bailing us out for years, and now it's just gotten out of hand. Andrew can't even pay his own bills without coming to you," she said, her voice rising with every word. "You've given us everything we could ever need, but we don't need your charity anymore. He needs to stand on his own feet." I stared at her in disbelief. Charity? How could she say that? I had been helping them because I loved them, because I wanted to make their lives easier. But as I listened to Rachel's words, a terrible realization began to take shape. She didn't see my support as an act of love. She saw it as something to take advantage of. "I've been more than generous, Rachel. What's going on? I've always helped because I care," I said, my voice growing shaky. "I know you care, but it's too much. You've made us dependent on you, and it's not healthy. I've been talking to Andrew, and we both agree it's time for things to change. We need you to stop helping us financially." My heart stopped. I felt as if the ground had just dropped out from beneath me. I looked at Rachel, trying to find the words to respond, but they wouldn't come. How had things gotten so bad? How had my generosity turned into something that pushed my own family away? "I don't understand," I said softly. "You've always known I was here to help. What's changed?" She sighed, shaking her head as though she were dealing with a child. "What's changed is that we don't want to be constantly dependent on you anymore. We want to learn how to stand on our own. We can't keep living like this." I was stunned, unable to comprehend what was happening. For so many years, I had believed that my love and support were appreciated. But now, as I sat there listening to Rachel's words, I realized that my generosity had become a crutch, one that was now being pushed away. "I can't just stop helping you," I said, my voice breaking. "You're my family." Rachel stood up, her expression hardening. "That's the problem, Mom. You need to stop treating us like children. You've done enough. Let us handle our own problems from now on." With that, she walked out, leaving me sitting alone in the cold silence of my living room. I felt like my entire world had just shifted. Everything I had done, all the love and care I had given, had been taken for granted. And now, Rachel and Andrew wanted to do it on their own? They wanted me to stop? As I sat there, the weight of the situation began to settle in. I couldn't let them take advantage of me any longer. They had crossed a line, and I wasn't sure I could forgive them. But one thing was certain: I couldn't let this go. If they wanted control, they were going to get it, but they wouldn't get my money, not anymore. Chapter 2. The Decision. The next morning, I woke with a new sense of determination. I had been more than generous. I had given them everything I had, and yet they wanted more. Rachel's words rang in my ears. "We need you to stop helping us financially." I had spent decades building my wealth, working hard to ensure that I could leave something behind for my family. But now, I realized that my family had taken that for granted. They had been living off of my kindness, using it as a way to avoid responsibility, and I wasn't going to let that continue. I went to my office and dialed the number of my financial advisor. I didn't hesitate. "Freeze all their access to my accounts," I said. "I'm not giving them another penny, not until they learn how to stand on their own 2 feet." The days after the confrontation with Rachel were a blur. The feeling of betrayal lingered like a cold shadow, creeping into my every thought. How could she say that? How could she, of all people, accuse me of spoiling them? I had done nothing but love and care for both her and Andrew. But now, everything felt twisted. They were pushing me away, rejecting the very thing I thought was love, financial support, a safety net, and yet they were now demanding that I stop. It wasn't just the words Rachel had said, but the way she said them. The calm, almost dismissive tone that implied she had no respect for the sacrifices I'd made. No acknowledgement of the years I had spent working tirelessly to build a comfortable life for my family. I had always believed in their potential, always believed that they would appreciate everything I had done for them. But this moment, this conversation, had shattered that illusion. I had always prided myself on being generous. I had opened my heart and my wallet to Andrew and Rachel without hesitation. But now, I realized that I had been enabling them, encouraging them to remain dependent on me rather than teaching them the importance of financial responsibility. And Rachel was right. In a way, they needed to learn how to stand on their own. But I wasn't sure if I was ready to completely sever the bond we had, even if that was what they seemed to want. But what Rachel didn't understand was that my help, my money, was not a bottomless well. It wasn't a charity, and I wasn't a bank that existed solely to bail them out. No, this time, I was taking control. If they wanted independence, they would get it, but it would come with a cost. They would no longer have access to my wealth. They would learn the value of hard work and self-sufficiency. I made the call to my financial advisor. His voice was calm and professional, as always, but there was an edge of concern when he heard the request. "Are you sure, Mrs. Armstrong?" he asked. "This will freeze all of their access. No exceptions. It could create some tension." "I'm sure," I said firmly. "Freeze their accounts. All of them. I'll decide when and if they get access to it again." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "Understood. I'll get it done immediately." The weight of the decision hit me the moment I hung up the phone. I had made a bold choice, one that would change the dynamics of my family forever. But something inside me told me it was necessary. I wasn't doing this to punish them. I was doing it because they needed to grow up. They needed to learn the consequences of their actions. The following day, I didn't hear from Andrew or Rachel. They didn't reach out to ask why their access had been cut off, and I wondered if they had finally realized what they had done. But I wasn't going to reach out first. I wasn't going to apologize for taking control. If they wanted to fix things, they had to come to me, not the other way around. They had to prove that they could handle their own finances without relying on me. For the next few weeks, there was an eerie silence. I continued with my daily routines, my work, and my life. But every time I checked my phone, I felt a sense of dread. Was today the day they would finally reach out, demanding an explanation? Would they call me and beg for forgiveness? I wasn't sure what I wanted more: reconciliation, or them finally understanding the lesson I was trying to teach them. Either way, I couldn't go back to the way things were, not after Rachel's cold dismissal of everything I had done for them. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of radio silence, I received a call from Andrew. His voice sounded strained, and I could tell he had been holding back. "Mom," he began. "I don't know what happened. Rachel's been freaking out about the accounts. She's angry, but I think it's more than just the money. We've been arguing nonstop about it. She doesn't understand why you'd do something like this." "I think she understands exactly why, Andrew," I replied calmly. "But you don't, do you?" "What do you mean?" His voice cracked, frustration bleeding through. "You both took me for granted. I've given you both everything. Money, support, my time. And you've never had to work for it. You never had to earn it. You've lived in the safety of my wealth for years, and it's made you lazy. You've forgotten the value of hard work." There was silence on the other end. For a moment, I thought Andrew had hung up. But then he spoke again. I never realized it was like that, Mom. I didn't see it that way. I thought you were just helping us because you loved us." "I do love you, Andrew," I said, my voice softening. "But love doesn't mean enabling. I've been enabling you both for too long. And Rachel, she's a part of this too. She needs to understand that her entitlement doesn't come without consequences." Andrew sighed deeply, the weight of my words settling in. "I don't know how to fix this, Mom. We've both been relying on your generosity for so long. I don't know how to stand on my own." I paused, letting the silence stretch between us. "Then it's time you learned. I'm here, but I'm not going to hand you everything anymore. You and Rachel have to earn your independence. This isn't about punishment. It's about teaching you both responsibility." I could hear Andrew's voice crack as he spoke again. "I'm sorry, Mom. You're right. We've been selfish. We've taken you for granted." "I know," I said quietly. "But now you have a chance to change. To grow. To become the people you were meant to be. And I believe you can do it. But it starts with taking responsibility for your own lives." The decision I made to freeze their accounts had left a palpable silence in my life. For weeks, I didn't hear from Andrew or Rachel. The days dragged on, and each time my phone buzzed with a message or a call, I would hold my breath, hoping it was one of them. But there was nothing. Not a word, not a text, nothing to acknowledge what had transpired between us. At first, I thought I'd feel relief. After all, this was my chance to finally step back and let them take control of their own lives. But as the silence stretched on, the weight of the situation became more apparent. It was one thing to make the decision, it was another to sit with the consequences. The long years of helping them, of watching them take advantage of my generosity, seemed like a distant memory now. I had done what I thought was necessary, but the bitterness of their rejection, their apparent indifference to my act of reclaiming my life, made everything feel hollow. I went about my days, focusing on my business ventures, catching up on long-forgotten hobbies, and reconnecting with friends I hadn't spoken to in years. But no matter how busy I kept myself, the thoughts of Andrew and Rachel lingered in the background of my mind. Were they angry with me? Did they understand why I did what I did? Or had they simply moved on, resigned to the idea that I would always be there when they needed me? Then, one rainy afternoon, my phone rang. "Mom?" Andrew's voice came through the speaker, a mix of uncertainty and something deeper: guilt, perhaps. "Can we talk?" I froze. The moment I had been anticipating, yet dreading, had arrived. This was it. The moment of reckoning. I had been expecting an apology, or at the very least, a conversation about why I'd made such a drastic decision. but part of me wondered if he was simply reaching out to get access to the money again. I tried to push the cynical thought away, knowing that wasn't what I needed to focus on. Yes, I replied, my voice calm, despite the turmoil I felt inside. What's on your mind? There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could tell that Andrew was carefully choosing his words, and that made my heart ache. He was always so quick to speak before, so full of confidence that came from knowing I would catch him if he fell. But now, that assurance seemed to be gone. Mom, I've been thinking a lot about everything, he started. About the accounts, about you freezing everything, and, well, about everything we've done. And I know it was wrong. I know I've taken you for granted. I felt a sharp pang in my chest. It wasn't easy to hear those words. He wasn't wrong, of course. But hearing him say it out loud made me realize just how deeply this whole situation had cut. I wanted to believe in his words, but part of me couldn't let go of the hurt just yet. Andrew, I said, my voice steady, I didn't do this to punish you. I did it because you need to understand responsibility. Your mother and I have spent so many years enabling you, thinking we were doing what was best for you. But we were wrong. You were never given the opportunity to stand on your own 2 feet. He was silent for a moment, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in his mind. I understand that now, he said, his voice soft. I should have never relied on you the way I did. It wasn't fair to you. I've been selfish, and so has Rachel. Hearing him admit that made my heart ache even more. I had always thought of Andrew as a man who would take charge of his life, someone who would follow in my footsteps. But the truth was, I had been so busy trying to support him, I never stopped to wonder if I was making him weaker, not stronger. And Rachel, well, I knew she had her own issues with entitlement, but hearing Andrew admit that both of them had been wrong made me question just how deep the manipulation had gone. I know you think I've been unfair, Andrew continued, his voice breaking through my thoughts. But I need to tell you, I want to make it right. I want to fix this, Mom. I can't keep going the way I was. His words hit me harder than I expected. Andrew, I said, trying to keep my composure. I'm glad you're realizing this. But understand this. This is your journey. Your responsibility. And Rachel's blank, you both need to learn to live without my support. I can't be the safety net anymore. You'll have to find your own way. There was a long silence on the phone. I could tell that Andrew was processing what I had said. And for the first time, I could hear the tension in his voice. I get it, Mom, I really do. And I'm sorry. I'm going to fix this, I promise you. I felt a shift in the conversation. A change I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't the immediate forgiveness I was expecting. Nor was it an attempt to manipulate me. Instead, it was a real acknowledgement of the mess they had made. I wasn't sure if this was the beginning of something new, but at that moment, I felt a small weight lift from my chest. Good, I said quietly. But it's going to take time, Andrew. And it will be up to you to prove that you can handle it. No more excuses. No more relying on me. I understand. We'll figure it out, Mom. I'll make it right. And I'll make you proud again. The call ended with a quiet finality. As I sat there, I realized that this wasn't the end, but the beginning. I had set the boundaries, and now, they would need to meet them. The road ahead would be long, and there would be more bumps along the way. But I had to trust that Andrew and Rachel could learn. This wasn't about punishment, it was about growth. But as I sat in my quiet living room, the weight of the decision I had made still lingered. Was I doing the right thing? Would they really change? And how much more could I take before it all became too much? The weeks that followed Andrew's call felt like a strange limbo. The initial sense of relief I'd felt from my decision to freeze their accounts had given way to doubt and a growing unease. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end, but just the beginning of a long and difficult journey. I had made a bold move, one that I had hoped would force Andrew and Rachel to face the consequences of their behavior. But now that the shock had worn off, the true weight of the situation was beginning to settle in. The house felt empty in a way it hadn't before. The silence between my husband, Robert, and me grew louder with each passing day. He had been quiet, observing from a distance, unsure of how to navigate the situation. It wasn't that he disagreed with me, he was always supportive when it came to family matters, but he had always preferred to avoid conflict. And now, he could sense the growing divide between me and our son. One evening, as I was putting dinner on the table, Robert spoke up. "How are you really feeling about this, Janet?" His voice was soft, tentative, but the question carried more weight than I was ready to admit. I paused, the spoon hovering over the pot of soup. I had spent so much time focusing on the decision itself that I hadn't given myself permission to reflect on how it was affecting me personally. I turned to face him, my eyes heavy with fatigue. "I feel conflicted," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "I know I did the right thing, but I can't help but wonder if I've pushed them too far. What if they don't come back from this? What if I've lost them for good?" Robert set down his glass of water and came over to stand beside me. "You had to do what you thought was best. They need to learn responsibility, Janet. You've given them everything, but you've been enabling them. They can't keep leaning on you forever." I nodded, but there was a lingering unease in my heart that I couldn't shake. "I know, but it doesn't make it easier. I've spent my entire life making sure they were taken care of. And now I'm questioning everything. Did I overstep? Did I go too far? I didn't want to punish them. I just wanted them to grow up." "You did what you had to do," Robert reassured me, taking my hand in his. "It's going to be difficult, but sometimes we have to make the hard decisions to help our children become who they're meant to be. This isn't the end of the road, it's a wake-up call for them." I wanted to believe that. I truly did. But deep down, I still feared that I had broken something that couldn't be fixed. I had always been the rock of our family, the one who held everything together. Now, I had shattered that image, and I wasn't sure if the pieces could ever be put back together. The following weeks were tense. Rachel reached out a few times, but our conversations were strained. She had barely spoken to me since I'd frozen the accounts, and I could hear the distance in her voice. She was angry, but more than that, she was scared. Scared of losing the security she had come to depend on. Scared of facing the consequences of her own actions. But it wasn't just Rachel who was struggling, it was Andrew too. Despite his promise to turn things around, I could tell that he was struggling to find his footing. He had always relied on me for everything from financial support to emotional validation, and now that safety net was gone. I knew they were both upset, but I wasn't sure how to reach them anymore. My attempts to offer advice or guidance were met with resistance. They didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to face the truth, and part of me understood why. Change was hard, especially when you've lived a certain way for so long. But they had to change. For their own sake. One Friday afternoon, I received a call from Andrew. It wasn't a surprise, but it still sent a wave of anxiety through me. We had barely spoken in weeks, and I didn't know what to expect. His tone was different this time, calmer, more measured. Maybe he had finally come to terms with the situation, I thought. "Mom," he said, his voice steady. "I've been thinking about what you said. About responsibility. About how we've relied on you for too long." I could hear the sincerity in his voice, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the turning point. "I'm sorry for everything, Mom. For taking advantage of you, for not appreciating what you've done for us. Rachel and I have been talking a lot, and we both realize that we need to figure this out on our own. You were right to freeze the accounts. We've been living in a bubble, and it's time we popped it." I felt a mix of relief and uncertainty wash over me. This was the apology I had been waiting for, the recognition that they understood the gravity of what had happened. But part of me still felt cautious. Was this a genuine change? Or was it just another plea to get access to my money? "Andrew," I said softly, my voice shaking. I'm glad you're realizing this. But understand this. This is just the beginning. You and Rachel need to prove that you can handle your responsibilities without relying on me. I can't be your safety net anymore. If you want to rebuild, you have to do it on your own. I know, Mom, Andrew replied. I'll do whatever it takes. I promise. But I need your help. In the right way this time. I hesitated, unsure if I was ready to offer anything yet. But in that moment, I realized something important. They were beginning to understand what I had been trying to teach them all along. It wasn't about money, it was about respect, responsibility, and self-sufficiency. All right, I said, my voice steadier now. I'm not going to make it easy, Andrew. But I'll support you. Just not the way I've been doing it. The weeks after Andrew's apology were a blur of mixed emotions. I was glad he was finally taking responsibility, but a part of me still questioned whether this shift was real or just a temporary moment of clarity. It was hard to tell. After years of being the one they relied on for everything, it was difficult to suddenly let go and allow them to find their own way. But I knew I had made the right decision, even if it felt like walking on thin ice. I could sense Rachel's growing frustration. Her pride wouldn't let her reach out. And I wasn't about to beg her to talk to me. I had made my stance clear. If she wanted to fix things, she would have to come to me on her own terms. There was no place for entitlement in my life anymore. It was time to show them both the real value of hard work and independence. One afternoon, about a month after Andrew's call, I received a message that I hadn't been expecting. It was from Rachel. Can we meet? We need to talk. I hadn't heard from her directly in weeks. The last time we'd spoken, she had been distant, avoiding eye contact and cutting the conversation short. So when I saw her name pop up on my phone, I felt a sense of apprehension. What was she thinking now? Was this just another plea for help? Or was it something more? I took a deep breath and replied, agreeing to meet at a cafe that we both used to visit when Andrew and Rachel were first married. It was a neutral place, somewhere we could sit and talk without the weight of our past interactions looming over us. When Rachel walked in, she looked different. The arrogance I had seen in her before was gone, replaced by a vulnerability I hadn't expected. Her face was drawn, her eyes tired. She had always been put together, always exuding confidence. But now, she seemed to be carrying a heavy burden. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. She sat down across from me, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. I know we haven't talked in a while. I didn't know what to say, so I simply nodded. The silence between us was thick, filled with unspoken words that neither of us seemed ready to utter. "I've been thinking," she began after a long pause, "about everything. About the money, about what you've done for us, and how we took it for granted." I wanted to say something, to tell her that I already knew how this conversation was going to go. But I kept quiet. I had to let her speak her truth, just as Andrew had done. "I'm sorry, Mom," Rachel continued, her eyes downcast. "I'm sorry for the way I've treated you, for how I've manipulated you. I've been so selfish. And I can't keep doing this. I don't want to be like this anymore." Hearing her say those words, finally acknowledging her role in everything, was like a weight lifting off my shoulders. But there was still a part of me that wasn't sure if I could forgive her so easily. Forgiveness was a process, and it couldn't be rushed. "I'm proud of you for admitting it," I said quietly. "But this isn't something that can be fixed overnight. You can't just apologize and expect everything to go back to normal." "I know," she whispered. "But I'm ready to change. To learn how to stand on my own. I don't want to be the person I've been. I don't want to be someone who takes advantage of others." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. It was hard to reconcile the woman sitting before me with the person I had once known, the one who had believed that everything should be handed to her without effort. But as I looked at her, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Remorse. Real, genuine remorse. "I'm willing to work on this, Mom," Rachel said, her voice steady. "But I need your help. Not with money, but with guidance. I need to learn how to be financially responsible, how to manage things on my own. I can't keep relying on you. And I don't want to. I studied her for a moment, weighing her words. The road to redemption was long, and it would take time for Rachel to prove that she could truly change. But there was something in her eyes that made me believe she was finally ready to take that first step. "I'll help you, Rachel," I said finally. "But it's not going to be easy. I'm not going to hand you anything. You'll have to earn everything. And you'll have to do it on your own terms." She nodded. "I understand. And I'm ready to put in the work." The conversation ended on a quiet note, but something had shifted between us. It wasn't a magical reconciliation, but it was a start. A start that would require patience, effort, and trust, things that had been lacking for far too long. The days that followed were a mix of hope and skepticism. Rachel had started to take responsibility for her finances, attending seminars on financial literacy and budgeting, even enrolling in an online course to better manage her money. It wasn't easy for her. She stumbled more than once, frustrated by the process. But each time she struggled, she reached out something I hadn't expected. I saw small changes in her: more humility, a genuine desire to learn, and a recognition that the world didn't revolve around her. Slowly, bit by bit, the walls between us began to crumble. Andrew, too, had been making strides. He started working part-time at a local restaurant, something I hadn't expected but had secretly hoped for. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it was a start. He was learning the value of hard work, not just for the paycheck but for the sense of accomplishment that came with it. And while he still struggled, he no longer saw his success as something owed to him. It was something he had to earn, just like everyone else. One evening, several months after our conversation, I received a call from Rachel. It was late, and I wasn't sure what to expect, but when I heard her voice on the other end of the line, I knew it was different. "Mom, I just wanted to call and say thank you," Rachel said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for not giving up on me. I know I've made a lot of mistakes, and I don't expect you to forget them, but I need you to know that I'm trying. I'm trying to be the person you always believed I could be." I could hear the sincerity in her voice, and it made my heart swell. It wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was a start. And that was all I could ask for. "I'm proud of you, Rachel," I replied, my voice soft. "You're doing the hard work, and that's what matters." The days that followed Rachel's phone call felt like a new beginning, though the road ahead was still uncertain. Despite the progress Rachel was making, I knew that true change would take time. It would take consistency, hard work, and, most importantly, trust. I had set the boundaries, and they had taken the first steps toward proving they were capable of standing on their own. But would they maintain this effort? That was the question that lingered in my mind every time I thought about what lay ahead. As for me, I had slowly begun to reclaim my life. It wasn't just about the money, it was about my identity. For so many years, I had been defined by my role as a provider, as the one who always said yes to every request. But now, I was learning how to say no, not out of spite, but out of necessity. I was learning how to put myself first for once, how to rebuild my life without the weight of my family's dependence on me. It wasn't an easy transition. There were moments when I felt guilty, when I wondered if I had gone too far by freezing their access to my accounts. But then I would remind myself of the bigger picture. This wasn't just about money, it was about teaching them the lessons they had failed to learn on their own. And so, I spent my time focusing on the things that mattered most to me: my work, my passions, and the things I had neglected for so long. I had always been a workaholic, pouring my energy into building my career and my fortune. But in the years I had spent helping my family, I had lost touch with the things that truly brought me joy. I started taking weekends off to visit art galleries, to explore new hobbies, and to connect with old friends. I rediscovered a sense of freedom that I hadn't known I'd lost. But even as I rebuilt my own life, my thoughts still drifted to Andrew and Rachel. I had taken the first step toward cutting them off, But I knew the next step would be about rebuilding trust not just with them, but with myself. I wasn't ready to let go entirely. I couldn't help but feel that, despite everything, they were still my children. And as a mother, the instinct to protect them, to shield them from harm, was a difficult one to suppress. A few months passed, and I began to see the subtle shifts in both Andrew and Rachel. They were still struggling, still working through the consequences of their actions, but there was an honesty in their efforts that hadn't been there before. Rachel, in particular, seemed to be working harder than ever. She had enrolled in an online course to learn about personal finance and budgeting, and she had started working part-time at a local boutique. I was proud of the steps she was taking, but I still couldn't shake the fear that it might all unravel if they slipped up. Andrew, too, had taken a new job, nothing fancy, just a position at a local restaurant, but it was a job he had earned on his own, without any help from me. He was proud of it, and that pride was something I hadn't seen in him for a long time. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about his dignity. And though he still had moments of doubt, I saw a strength in him that I hadn't recognized before. He was learning, albeit slowly, how to live without relying on me. One afternoon, after several weeks of silence, I received another call from Andrew. His voice was calm, more confident than it had been before. "Mom, I wanted to tell you something," he said. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened, and I just wanted to say thank you for everything." I felt a tightness in my chest. I had always wondered if Andrew would ever really understand why I had done what I did. But hearing him speak like this, hearing the sincerity in his voice, made me realize that maybe, just maybe, we were on the right track. "I know I haven't been the best son," he continued, "and I know I've made a lot of mistakes. But I'm trying, Mom. I'm really trying. And I owe it to you, to everything you've taught me, to make things right." I closed my eyes, my heart swelling with pride. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when Andrew realized the value of the lessons I had tried so hard to teach him. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about him becoming the man I had always known he could be. "I'm proud of you, Andrew," I said softly. "You've made a lot of mistakes, but you're trying to make things right. That's all I ever wanted, to see you take responsibility." The line went silent for a moment, and I could hear Andrew's breath catch. "I won't let you down again, Mom. I promise." And in that moment, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. There was hope for Andrew and Rachel. There was hope for our family. And maybe, just maybe, this would be the start of something new. Later that week, Rachel called. Her voice, though still guarded, was different from the one I had heard months before. It was softer, more thoughtful. "Mom, I know we've had our differences," she began, "but I want to thank you for giving me the chance to prove myself. I know I've made a lot of mistakes, but I'm working hard to change. I just need you to know that I'm trying." I nodded to myself, feeling a sense of relief. The road to rebuilding our relationship would still take time. But this was the first step. And it was a step I hadn't been sure we'd ever take. "I see that, Rachel," I said, my voice steady. "I see the effort you're making, and that means a lot to me." As I reflected on the changes I had witnessed in Andrew and Rachel, I realized that this journey wasn't just about them. It was about me, too. About reclaiming my life, my boundaries, and my peace of mind. The lessons I had taught them, the hard decisions I had made, had taught me as well. It wasn't easy to say no, but it was necessary. And now, as I looked ahead, I felt a quiet sense of optimism that I hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long while, I was living for myself. And I was beginning to see that sometimes, the most difficult decisions were the ones that led to the greatest rewards.